Hey everyone, welcome back to She Birds Podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Show, and today's guest is Randi-Lee. Hi, Randy.
Hello, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much for being a guest today, a returning guest.
Well, thank you so much for having me back.
So, can you tell my listeners a little bit about yourself again?
Of course. So, my name is Randi-Lee Boslaw. I am in Canada, just across the border, though, super close. And I am an author of over 10 books, a lot about mental health, and then some kids' books. I have 2 kids. I also have a grandbaby, and been married now almost 12 years. And the most important thing, I have 4 cats and 3 dogs.
A lot of love. I love
So
animals.
much love. Yeah.
But so today
They are the best.
Yeah, they are. They are. I love my dog. I keep sending pictures of me and my dog to people, and they're like, "You really love that dog, don't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do."
I love it when you post pictures of your dog.
So I wanted to chat with you a little bit about your book, Goodbye Too Soon. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yeah, so that book, it came out last year, and it came out on the 2-year anniversary of my brother's death. The book is about his death due to a drug overdose, and it talks a lot about setting boundaries with somebody who has an addiction, risk factors for those with an addiction, as addiction is a mental illness, and forgiveness to that person, forgiveness to yourself for having to have boundaries, and just the entire process of when I found out that he had died, up until when we buried him.
Oh wow. Oh man, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like go into deeper details about that, or do you want to
I
leave
will
that out?
talk about anything you want to ask me a question about.
What type of addiction did he have?
Drugs. I don't know if he had any one particular drug that he liked, but I do know that was fentanyl that was the last one that he took.
Oh, that drug's been killing a lot of people, especially kids. Like kids has been taking it too, and I'm like,
Yeah, fentanyl is such a scary drug. It's really become quite rampant in the last couple of years. And I don't know if he specifically bought fentanyl or if what he bought was laced with fentanyl, because
mhm,
that's a big thing that's happening right now, too, is that things are being laced with it. And
yeah,
I mean, all drugs are bad, but that's the one that's actually killing people.
yeah, that's true. I've always wanted to know what fentanyl is. Like, what does it do? I never researched it.
I it's funny because I probably should have, but I didn't. But I was watching Chicago Med. I love that show. And they when somebody wants like a painkiller drug, it's that they're pushing whatever milligram fentanyl. So I think it started as a pain relief drug. Now I'm just guessing from based on a TV show. That it started as a pain drug and it's just sort of morphed into a street drug that I bet is probably laced with some not so good stuff, probably straight up chemicals, is my guess.
Wow. Wow. I wonder what it does to you though. Like what does it do to your body? Does it make your body feel good and you just die slowly or
I think so. Let's see. Fentanyl. Here we go. I'm I'm gonna Google it for everybody. So, fentanyl is a potent synthetic piperidine opioid primarily used as an analgesic. It is 50 times more potent than heroin and
Oh,
100 times more potent than morphine. Its primary clinical utility is in pain management for cancer patients and those recovering from painful surgeries. It's also used as a sedative. So, yeah, you're feeling absolutely no pain and potentially going to sleep because it's used as a sedative and then just not waking up.
what? Oh my God. Oh
Yeah.
man. I did not know that. Man.
No, me neither. And that was just like a super quick Google that, wow, 100 times more potent than morphine. Like that is extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, and a lot of people are dying from it, a whole lot. And I'm surprised that kids are dying from it. They're like taking medication from other people and dying from it. I'm like,
I think that maybe it's easier to get their hands on since it is a prescribed drug, right? Like, because it's prescribed for the cancer treatment, like I said, and from
yeah.
surgery recovery. So it's probably an easier one to get your hands on if somebody's selling their prescription for pain relief as opposed to maybe some of these other drugs.
Oh man, man. So you want to read a little bit from your book?
I sure can. So, just before we went live, I was saying to Brooke that normally I read chapter 1, but I'm gonna be extra special for everybody today on this extra special day. And I'm gonna read chapter 3 because I think it's super fitting, and really quite important. So chapter 3 is about risk factors. And so yeah, I'm gonna get into it. Risk factors are things that contribute to developing a mental illness. Just as smoking can increase the risk of lung cancer, certain factors increase the risk of developing an addiction. Trauma. Children who have had a history of trauma, such as witnessing or experiencing violence or abuse, have been shown to be at higher risk for substance use and addiction later in life. That's from drugfree.org. Being the younger sister meant that mom shielded me from many things that happened to Brandon. However, I know a few things that had lasting effects on him, and I'm sure there are many that I'll never know. Brandon and I have different dads. His dad left and wasn't around. I've never actually met him. Because of this, Brandon came with me to my dad's house every other weekend. Everyone on that side of the family considered Brandon family and mourned his loss like the rest of us. At a young age, Brandon's only male role model was a man who seemed to care more about money than his children. I don't know if my dad was aware that he treated Brandon significantly differently than he treated me, but Brandon surely felt it every time it happened. Being biologically related or not should not have mattered. It never made a difference to us that we were half siblings. Brandon was blamed for things he never did and yelled at for what I did. He was just a little boy being bullied by a man that was supposed to protect him. I was heartbroken when, at 12 years old, Brandon refused to come on the weekends with me to visit my dad. By the time I was 12, I came to my own decision and stopped going. When Brandon was in grade 8, his dad came back into his life. Brandon moved to another city to live with his dad, hoping to get to know him. It couldn't have been easy on Mom, who had raised him alone for over a decade, but she wanted to support Brandon in getting to know his dad. It was weird having Brandon move out for an entire school year. We'd always lived in the same house. While Brandon lived there, his dad said it was Mom's fault Brandon didn't know his dad. This couldn't have been easy for Brandon to absorb. There was no evidence that Mom ever stopped his dad from being around, but all children want to believe their parents. Brandon believed what his dad said, putting a strain on his relationship with Mom. Since I was so young, Mom left me with family while she attended Brandon's grade 8 graduation. This would be his last graduation. When Brandon was very young, Mom changed his last name to match hers. It seems a fitting thing to do when you were the one raising him. Brandon later told me how his dad didn't stay for the ceremony once he realized that the diploma had Mom's last name on it. The emotional pain that must have caused Brandon is unthinkable. Brandon didn't talk to his dad again for years, realizing that his dad lied to him about Mom. He moved home with us and started high school. Brandon told me, though, the one other time he spoke with his dad, it was after his first child was born, nearly another decade after the grade 8 debacle. He hadn't contacted Brandon to congratulate or check up on him. It was to ask if Brandon would forgive the debt of child support that the government was trying to collect. Even if Brandon wanted to forgive the debt, he couldn't. It was a government level. Brandon told me that he said, "I can't, and I wouldn't do that. I hope that they take everything from you. By the way, you're a grandparent." Then he hung up. During an exciting time of being a first-time dad, he was metaphorically slapped in the face by his dad again. I consider myself lucky because I had Mom, my godmother, and aunts as my female role models. My brother had no one to teach him how to be a man or father. I know he loved his kids, but there was so much more to being a parent than just love. In school, he was bullied relentlessly for being poor. Some parents of his friends found out that we were poor and forced their kids to stop being friends with Brandon. Like being poor was contagious. Mom tried to help by changing his schools, but the damage was already done. Brandon had multiple traumatic events happen to him as a child. These left a lasting and damaging effect on him. Going through a traumatic event, accident, abuse, etc., or a series of traumatic events doesn't mean you will have an addiction. However, it is one of the risk factors. Getting the appropriate help to process and deal with the trauma is essential for your long term mental and physical health. I don't know how long you want me to read for, but that's the first little bit of the chapter. I can keep going if you want.
You can, but it's making me sad. Like I feel so sorry for Brandon, like what he went through. Like
he definitely had a rough go, but yeah, okay, I'll keep going. You can grab some tissues if you need. Locked away. Mom tried keeping me in a bubble away from Brandon's lifestyle. As a parent, I appreciate what she tried to do. I would have done the same. The problem was I knew he was in trouble, but didn't understand what that meant for the family. I didn't understand why mom took so much time off work or why she never took me to visit him. Brandon's actions didn't just affect him, they affected all of us. I knew mom was stressed and my stepfather was angry. I felt the hostility growing in the house. Brandon was in and out of juvenile hall under the Young Offenders Act, and the focus was on punishment, not rehabilitation. The distinction between the two is essential. As teenagers grow, they learn their place in the world, how to be successful in society, and coping strategies that will be with them for life. Before we discuss how Brandon's time through the criminal justice system was a risk factor for developing an addiction, let's look at the law. And just a reminder, I'm from Canada, so the law is quite different. So the Young Offenders Act, also known as YOA, was the legislation when Brandon was a teenager. This act was replaced in 2003 by the Youth Criminal Justice Act, the YCJA. Let's examine why and how the system changed to understand what someone might have experienced. The following information was gathered from justice.gc.ca. Prior to the YCJA, Canada had one of the highest youth incarceration rates in the Western world. Both the Young Offenders Act and the Youth Criminal Justice Act are for ages 12 to 17 inclusive. Points about the Young Offenders Act from 1983 to 2003. Sentences were not required to be proportionate to the seriousness of the offense. Proportionality is the principle of fairness. The punishment fits the crime. Custody was imposed as a sentence in less serious cases. Custody is being incarcerated, being in jail or juvenile detention. Custody orders do not include a period of community supervision after release. No support for reintegration into the community after being released. Summary of the Young Offenders Act. Overall, there was an overuse of the justice system and incarceration of youth. Often the punishment did not fit the crime, resulting in extreme unfairness in sentencing. The youth had no support to help them effectively reintegrate after release from custody, leading to reoffending. No support, such as emotional or mental health, was provided to help them with rehabilitation. Points about the Youth Criminal Justice Act, 2003 to present. Sentences are proportional to the offense with meaningful consequences. The purpose is to hold youth accountable. Custody sentences are intended for violent offenders and serious repeat offenders. Court must consider all reasonable alternatives to custody, the least restrictive measures. Using extrajudicial measures before custody. So an it's a hard word to say. Extrajudicial means outside of the justice or court system. Most likely to rehabilitate and reintegrate the youth. New sentencing options included custody and supervision order, so a portion in custody and a portion in the community, a reprimand, a stern lecture or warning from the judge, intensive support and supervision order, a higher level of support and supervision, an attendance order, attends a program based on conditions set by the judge, deferred custody and supervision order, so you serve a sentence in the community, intensive rehabilitative custody and supervision order, sentence for serious violent offenders. Summary of the Youth Criminal Justice Act. Overall, there is a belief that youth can be rehabilitated and successful in the community. Before a formal court process, other measures need to be considered to keep the youth out of the system. A youth worker is assigned to every youth in custody to help the youth return to their community successfully and without reoffending. Every period of custody is followed by a period of supervision in the community. How Canada has changed. So custody sentences declined 64% from 2002-2003 and 2009-2010. So between the two changes in legislation. Guilty cases declined from 27% in 2002 to 2003 to 15% in 08-09. From 02-03, which was the last year of the Young Offenders Act, 1 in 4 guilty cases resulted in custody, whereas in '08 to '09, under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, only 1 in about 7 guilty cases resulted in custody. Canada's overall youth incarceration rate has declined by almost 50% under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. This comparison highlights how times have changed. The Young Offenders Act used harsher punishments to stop Brandon, whereas if convicted under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, he may not have ever been incarcerated, but made to attend therapy and take responsibility for his actions. Accountability, especially for youth, is a crucial step in becoming a well-adjusted adult. It seemed like Brandon never learned that lesson. Up until his death, he continued to blame others for his problems. Being tried under the Youth Criminal Justice Act meant that he never had to face the victims of his crimes or try to put right what he had done. Instead of using the smaller crimes as a learning experience to accept responsibility, he claimed innocence in an attempt to get a lesser sentence. He learned at a critical age never to take responsibility or admit guilt. We will never know the extent of the Young Offenders Act impact on Brandon, but in 2003, the law changed in a positive direction. So there's the next little bit in that chapter. I don't know if you have any questions for it, but I know that law is kind of your jam.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But I did want to ask, what did he do to people to get him incarcerated? I cannot pronounce that word.
So mostly it was petty theft. There was some break and enter. Basically going and stealing things so that he can go and buy drugs.
Oh.
Yeah. There
Oh.
was as he got older, I think there was also some assault charges in there and stuff, but because the book is referencing more his earlier kind of crimes, the ones that should have taught him to be more responsible and accountable, that kind of things. Those were like petty theft, break and enters for the purpose of stealing to buy drugs.
Man, do you think he was sad and depressed at how his father was treating him and stuff and being bullied, that he acted out?
I definitely think that had something to do with it, and I think that a lot of what addiction is, especially so I've talked to tons of people on my YouTube channel about their addiction, and the consensus seems to be from everybody that addiction is their Band-Aid for an underlying mental illness, whether it be anxiety, depression, whatever trauma. They're using the addiction to forget about that other stuff. And my brother definitely has had an anxiety disorder. I know that he had panic attacks. I remember his first one, that when I was around for it anyways. And so it probably had a lot to do with, when he was being bullied in school, what his dad did to him. So being depressed, having anxiety, and just band-aiding over to feel some kind of either sense of nothing or some sense of peace by doing the drugs.
Oh, wow. Wow. And the only drug that he was on was fentanyl that you know of, or was he on other drugs?
I pretty sure he was on other stuff. I think fentanyl was just like the newer one because he started doing drugs. So I can remember the first time he ever offered me drugs. I would have been about 10, so he would have been 14. So this is in 96, 97. And I don't think fentanyl was really hitting the streets at that time.
Yeah.
It was I think what it was, and to be honest, he never actually said what the drug was, but it's the one where you use the two hot knives and you put them together and like smoke it. So I think hash.
Oh, wow. At 14?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
How did he know about this? What happened?
That is an awesome question that I wish I had an answer for. I don't. He definitely got in with a crowd of people that had access to things that I never even knew existed at the time.
Oh,
and there's just when people trying to figure out how to say this properly, when people are trying to feel better and don't have access to appropriate coping strategies or know how to articulate their feelings. Because again, in the 90s, I mean, it's still happening now, but in the 90s, it was more, don't talk about it, especially boys. Boys don't cry. Boys don't, when you don't have the capacity to say, I'm feeling like hurting myself, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling whatever, what else are you supposed to do but turn to those who are treating you as a friend? And I'm going to say treating you as a friend, not being a friend, because no friend, no real friend is going to get you hooked on something that's going to hurt you, um, really. But you're going to reach out to those people who are going to stick by you, even though you feel like you're garbage. And for Brandon, I really do think that he felt like garbage based on even just that little bit that we read there, the trauma that he went through between his dad, my dad, and being picked on. Like I was picked on too for being poor, but the boys were so much worse than the girls. Like the girls I could handle. I was like, so what? My shoes are from Byway. I don't care. Whereas my brother, it really made a big impact on him. And girls were allowed to cry. We were allowed to be emotional. That was expected of girls. That wasn't expected of boys. So, it was a lot harder for him.
Yeah. And then your father was mistreating him.
Yeah, so my dad, my dad's not much of a dad. I don't know where Brooke went, but I know her question. So my dad wasn't much of a dad, and I don't have a relationship with him anymore. I haven't really talked to him in the past, well, I've been married for 12 years, so let's go with 12 years. Um, and he would blame Brandon for everything. So I remember my mom telling me this story about how one of my new toys was broken, and my dad immediately blamed Brandon, was yelling at him, and blaming him for having broken this toy and completely berating him. And so my brother must have been 5 maybe at the time, like just a little guy.
Mhm.
And in reality, I was the one that broke my toy. And
Um,
so at 5 years old, he's being yelled at and belittled by this person who's supposed to be your dad. And because my brother did call him dad for quite a long time.
mhm.
Um, but instead, he's not protecting you, he's yelling at you. And I know my dad that's how he was. He was a yeller. I remember one time long after Brandon had stopped coming, I was probably about 11, 12. We had went camping. I love camping. My dad said, we're going to be gone for, I think it was like 4 days. Okay, cool. And we were like 6 hours away from where we live. And then my dad said, oh, we're going to stay another 3 days. And I started bawling because I was homesick. I was always a homesick kind of kid. And I started crying because I just wanted to go home because that was my expectation. And he starts yelling at me about, well, I'm your dad, so why are you crying? It's not like you're not with family. Well, okay, but still isn't my home. I'm still sleeping in a tent here. Like, I
Right.
want to go home. Um, and so, if my dad was treating me that way and he was treating my brother worse than that, I mean, I can't, because I was 4 years younger than Brandon. There's stuff that I will never be privy to. But I just know that my dad was not much of a dad to me even, and he got it worse.
Oh man, man. Oh my God. Like listening to these stories of how people have been abused as children and how their parents talk to them, I'm like I never could imagine that, like at all.
That's a big reason why my mom left my dad, was because she was not okay with my dad treating Brandon that way. So I don't have any memory of the two of them ever being together. Um, they broke up when I was too young for memories. Um, because my mom was like, "No, you're not going to treat Brandon like that. Like that's not okay." Brandon wanted to come with me to go visit family. So my dad lived with my nana and papa, and they treated him just like all the other grandkids. My aunt and uncles, my cousins, everybody treated Brandon like he was part of the family, except my dad. But my dad was also a garbage dad. He doesn't watch
Dang.
any of my interviews anyways. So
Has he ever apologized to you at
no.
least?
I don't
That's
even think he acknowledges the fact that he was not a good dad. I don't even think that he has the capacity to understand that what he did was wrong.
Mhm.
I think in his mind, he didn't physically hurt us, so he was fine. But
Um,
emotional scars run deep.
yeah, yeah, they definitely do. Do your kids talk to him? Like, is
No,
he that way to him to them? Oh wow.
I haven't talked to my dad in 12 years. I thought, okay, maybe he's just not a children kind of person. Like some people just are not cut out to be around kids. I
Hmm.
thought, okay, maybe as an adult we can have a relationship. So I did try to talk to him as an adult. I invited him to my wedding. He did not sign my guest book. There's no picture of him being at my wedding. He left so early that I didn't even have a chance to like talk to him at my reception, nothing. And I was like, screw it then. If you aren't even going to sit through my reception with me
Hmm.
because you think I should have went up and talked to you sooner or whatever crazy concoction you have in your head. I don't have time for that drama. Like absolutely not. I have spent enough emotional time and energy attempting to make a relationship that clearly isn't there.
Hmm.
So I'm done.
Man, I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. At
Yeah.
all. So you being Brandon's little sister, did he ever confide in you, like ever cry to you or show emotion to you about how he was feeling or anything?
Not really. The only time that I can recall him being ever emotional, it was when he had his panic attack. He would have been so he would have just gotten out of jail, probably about 19. I would have been 15, 16, somewhere in there. And it was summertime. I remember him coming into my room and he was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know. And he's like, what's the address of the house? I think I need the ambulance. So we called the ambulance. The fire truck always arrives first here.
Yeah.
Um and so they came, they checked him out, and I remember like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And he's like, and turns out it was just a panic attack. Which I mean, I say just a panic attack, but they are pretty severe. I'm not trying to downplay panic disorders. But he thought it was worse. He thought it was like a heart attack. So being just a panic attack is much better. Um, and that's the only time I can ever remember him being super emotional. I think there was sometimes he was slightly emotional when his kids were taken away, things like that, or when he was told he can't see them. But he, instead of being showing sadness, he would get angry.
Mhm.
So why can't I do this? Why is everybody saying I'm a bad person? So he was very much internalizing things, personalizing things,
Mhm.
instead of saying, okay, so I do have a problem and I need help. He was saying, I don't have a problem. Everyone else has a problem with how I am. It's their problem, not mine.
Oh,
And that's just not the truth.
oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, he's one of those people that get angry and blame everyone else. Okay.
Yeah. And again, and that's why I kind of wanted to link back to the different legislations. And I have no idea if that has any true bearing in his concept of accountability, but it's such a contrasting difference between the legislation he was under when he was a teenager to the
Mhm.
legislation that they use now, because there is that accountability piece that wasn't there before, where it was very much lie to try and not get in trouble.
Mhm.
Whereas now it's like, tell the truth so we can help you.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that's why I wanted to reflect on those two different pieces in the book, because it is very different if you're teaching a child, and I say child, anybody under 18, because as a teenager, you are learning who you are in this world. You are
Mhm.
trying to figure out who you are as a person, how you fit into this world. And if you are teaching them at that age that don't take responsibility because taking responsibility will get you in more trouble, you are setting them up for failure.
That's true. That's true. Oh wow. So, does Brandon's kids know about his addiction? Like, do they know about what
Mhm.
happened? They
Yes,
do.
yeah, they do. So, my nephew is 20, so he knows the most, and then they kinda go down in age from there. Um, they know, they actually have copies of the book. Um, my niece said it made her cry and kinda was the most fitting tribute to Brandon, because, yes, it talks about his mental illness, but there's also a lot that talks about him as a person.
Mhm.
Because there is a drastic difference between who they are and what their mental illness is.
Mhm.
And I think that goes for a lot of people with mental illness. Who they are as a person is not defined by their mental illness.
Mhm. Mhm.
Their mental illness is just that. It is an illness, a sickness. They need help, which is not always easy to get, and they don't always get it.
Mhm.
But who they are as an actual person, like as my brother, as a father, is a completely different individual. It's just being overshadowed by this illness that they have that they need help for that they can't seem to get the help for. So it's such a tricky line when we're talking about mental illness or addiction or whatever, because there is that, well, for the past 20 years, Brandon's been in this illness. He was been very, very sick. And so that's what most people know him as. But in those few glimpses where he would try to get sober and try to get help, um, you could see his actual personality. And he was such a good person. I remember one time I was a teenager and he literally gave this person his shoes because this person needed shoes and Brandon had an extra pair.
Oh.
So as a person, he had a really good heart. A bunch of the merch on my merch store is his art. It skipped me. But he was a really good artist. And, if he could have just, focused on that instead, then maybe he could have used that as an outlet. But again, this illness was just so strong. And I mean, as family members, we often don't know what it is we need to do to help them because they need to do the work. What
Mhm.
we can do to help them is support them to get to therapy, help them find a therapist, maybe help pay for the therapist because it's not cheap. Um, but ultimately, they have to do all of the work. And Brandon actually was before his death. He was applying to a drug and alcohol recovery place. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head right now, but it was a Christian-based one, and it was a couple hours away. And so he was applying to it. He was actually getting the application sent to my aunt's house. It came like 2 weeks after his death, to her house, the application. It was a bit of a longer form than your typical rehab place. Um, but again, I don't think that he went, fentanyl, that sounds great. I think it was just, hey, one last hit. I'll feel better until I get there. And he could never get there.
Yeah.
Because again, being sick overrides other functions.
Mhm. Mhm. That's true. And when you speak about addictions, I have an addiction. Mine is food. So, I mean, they
Me
can kill me
too.
too. They can kill me too.
Yeah, I've come to realize that yeah, food is a big issue for me. So we don't buy it, and therefore I won't have it. Like if there is a bag of cookies in the house, and I mean I'm saying this very silly type, but honestly, if there is a bag of cookies in the house, I don't have the capacity to be like, I'm gonna eat two and I'm just gonna leave them for the rest of the day. Like that's not a thing I can do. Um, so at least I have the wherewithal though to leave them at the grocery store and not buy them because I would literally eat the entire package. So my illness isn't quite as severe as Brandon's was, but I like that you bring that up because addiction comes in so many shapes and sizes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because when I was in the hospital, that's what they told me. My addiction was food. Because I would buy a lot of food, and mine was fast food, and that's not good.
No, no. And I think we forget that anything can be an addiction. Food is one that people forget about, but literally anything. Videos, games can be an addiction.
Yeah.
Phones can be an addiction. TV, gambling, like anything can be an addiction. It's really how impactful it is on your life.
Mhm.
Um, and that's why actually in the book I go through the DSM-5 criteria for being diagnosed with an addiction because it does show that as long as you're hitting these key things, you have an actual addiction mental illness.
Mhm.
Whereas sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I'm addicted to that because it's just so good. Well, no, let's not joke about it because it's a really, really
Sure.
severe illness
Yes.
that affects thousands of people, millions probably. And it comes in every shape and size.
Yes, true. So, for my last question for you, before I let you go, what advice would you give those who are struggling with addiction like your brother was?
Um, Reach out for help. And I mean, I say it so simply, but that is the hardest thing to do. Because you have to admit first and foremost that you have a problem. You have to admit that you are ill,
Mhm.
and nobody wants to admit that they're ill. Admit that you're ill and actually try and get the help. So if you are struggling, it's it's okay that you're struggling. Everybody has something they struggle with, whether it is an addiction, whether it's depression, whether it's um cancer. I mean, we're all struggling with something at some point in our lives. So it's okay to say, "Hey, I have a problem. I have a sickness, I have an illness, whatever," and reach out to help. Because there's tons of different types of help out there as well, right? There's rehab, there's counseling, there's psychologists, there's medication, there's meditation. Like there's just so many different things, and not there is no one cookie cutter. There we go. I can talk. There is no one cookie cutter um, thing that works for everybody.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's okay to admit it, and it's okay to try different things. Even if the first thing doesn't work, if you try meditation, that doesn't work for you, that's okay. It doesn't make
Yeah.
you a failure. It means that thing didn't work for you, and let's try something else. Um,
Yes, definitely.
don't give up on yourself.
Definitely. I want to thank you so much, Randy, for being a guest today on my podcast and chatting with me.
Thank you so much for having me come back. I always love chatting with you.
Thank you. You too. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye. Hey everyone, thank you all so much for listening to my interview with Randy, speaking about her book dedicated to her brother, Goodbye Too Soon. If you'd like to purchase it, you can go on her website, and her website is rbwriting.ca, and the book is called Goodbye Too Soon. It's in the nonfiction settings, I think. Yeah, it's in the nonfiction, and you can go and purchase it, or you can purchase it on Amazon. I want to thank you all so much for listening to Shoeburst Podcast, and see you next time for the next interview. Bye.